Let me help you. God's message today. Rain fell heavily on the thatched roof of Anna's old house, each drop pounding against her broken heart. It had been 3 months since she lost her job at the textile factory, the only source of income to feed her 2 young children. Bills piled up on the kitchen table, next to a stale loaf of bread and an empty jug that once held milk. Anna sat there, her trembling hands clutching a small wooden cross her mother had left her before passing away. God, she whispered, I don't know what to do anymore. Anna hadn't always been a praying woman. Life had once been a string of bright days, a loving husband, a cozy little home, and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the yard. But then a car accident took David, her husband, leaving her alone in grief and responsibility. Since then, she had drifted away from faith, feeling as though God had turned his back on her. But tonight, in her desperation, she had nowhere else to turn. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. If you're still there, please give me a sign. I need help. The wind whistled through the cracks in the window, but no answer came. Just the heavy silence of the empty house. Anna hadn't always been the timid woman huddled in her small home, hands shaking as they held the cross. Before the darkness descended, she had been a flame, not a blazing, consuming fire, but a gentle, steady light that warmed those around her. At 20, she met David at a church service in town. He was a carpenter, with calloused hands and a smile that could melt the coldest winter day. They fell in love through afternoon walks by the river, shared prayers by candlelight, and a promise to build a family rooted in faith. When their first child, Jacob, was born, Anna felt as though God had given her a perfect gift. 2 years later, little Lily arrived, with clear blue eyes just like her father's. Their life wasn't wealthy, but it was full, a small house on the edge of town, laughter spilling from the backyard, and evenings reading the Bible by the fireplace. Anna often sang the hymns her mother had taught her, her voice soft but certain, a reminder that Jesus was always near. But then, on a rainy October afternoon, everything changed. David was driving home from the workshop, carrying a small chair he'd made for Lily's birthday. A truck skidded on the slick road and crashed into him. He was gone instantly, leaving Anna standing by his coffin, clutching Jacob and Lily, her heart shattered beyond words. The days that followed were a prolonged nightmare. Anna couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, just stared at the empty space where David once sat. She remembered his words, God always has a plan, Anna. Even when we don't understand. But now, she saw no plan, just emptiness and pain. She stopped going to church, stopped singing, and gradually, the wooden cross, her mother's last gift, was tucked into a corner of a cupboard. Gathering dust, she threw herself into work at the textile factory to feed her children, but the sorrow never left. When the factory closed 3 months ago, Anna's last bit of strength flickered out. She felt utterly abandoned, not just by life, but by God himself. The next morning, Anna was roused by a knock at the door. She reluctantly got up, pulling a blanket around her shoulders, and opened it. Before her stood an elderly man with white hair, wearing a worn coat but with eyes that shone with an inexplicable warmth. He held a basket filled with fresh vegetables and a newly baked loaf of bread. "My name is Samuel," he said, his voice deep and gentle. "I live at the end of the road. I heard you were struggling, and I thought you might need a little help." Anna hesitated. I don't have money to pay you." Samuel smiled. "I'm not here for money. I'm here because someone once told me, let me help you. I'm just passing it on." She was confused but accepted the basket, thanking him awkwardly. As Samuel left, Anna sensed something different about him, a peace she couldn't explain. She set the basket down and noticed a small piece of paper tucked under the bread. It read, "Fear not, for I am with you," a verse from the Bible, Isaiah 41 verse 10. Her heart pounded. The prayer from last night echoed in her mind. Was this the sign she'd asked for? She wasn't sure, but for the first time in months, a tiny spark of hope flickered within her. The day Samuel knocked on Anna's door, she didn't know her life was about to turn a new page. After he left with the basket of vegetables and the note with the Bible verse, Anna sat at the kitchen table, clutching the paper. "Fear not, for I am with you." She read it over and over, as if the words could pierce the fog in her mind. But were they true? She'd been afraid for so long, afraid of not having enough money, afraid her children would go hungry, afraid she wasn't strong enough to go on. The next day, Samuel returned, this time with an old but clean blanket. "It was cold last night," he said, handing it to her. "I thought the kids might need it." Anna took it, a mix of embarrassment and gratitude washing over her. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, "but I want to," Samuel replied, his voice calm but firm. "Have you ever helped someone, Anna, when they needed it most?" The question stopped her. She remembered the days with David, when they brought food to the widowed old lady down the road, or when she sat for hours by her dying mother's bedside, singing hymns to ease her pain. "Yes," she whispered. "But now I have nothing left to give." Samuel looked at her, his gaze deep as if seeing into her soul. "You still have yourself. And sometimes, that's all God needs to work a miracle." His words lingered with her all day. That night, after Jacob and Lily were asleep, she pulled the cross from the cupboard corner. She wiped off the dust, placed it on the table, and knelt. "I don't know if you still hear me," she prayed, her voice trembling. "But if you're there, please give me strength. I can't do this alone." In the days that followed, Samuel became a part of Anna's life. He showed up with small gifts, a bit of milk, a few eggs, or just a story to make her smile. Through their talks, he shared his own life, a man who had lost everything, family, possessions, in a devastating fire. "I was angry at God," he admitted. "But then I saw him in the little things, a hand reaching out, a smile, a chance to start over." One afternoon, as Anna mended Jacob's torn shoes, Samuel asked her, "Do you ever think God is still speaking to you?" Anna paused, her eyes shadowed with sorrow. "I used to think so. But after David died, I felt like he'd abandoned me." Samuel tilted his head, his look full of understanding. "Do you remember the story of Jesus on the boat with his disciples? When the storm came, they panicked, thinking he didn't care. But he was there, right in the storm, and he calmed the waves. Maybe he hasn't abandoned you, Anna. Maybe he's waiting for you to call him." His words cut through Anna's hardened shell like a knife. She thought of the nights she'd cried alone, the days she'd fought to feed her children, and that desperate prayer. Could Jesus really be there, even when she couldn't see him? A few days later, Samuel came with an idea. "You have skillful hands," he said, glancing at the shoes she was fixing for Jacob. "Why not make something to sell? Handkerchiefs, sweaters, anything you can." Anna shook her head. "I don't have tools or money for fabric." Samuel smiled. "Let me handle that." The next day, he brought a small box with needles, thread, and scraps of fabric. "This is all I have," he said. "But I believe you can turn it into something beautiful." Anna stared at the fabric scraps, doubt filling her. But then she remembered her mother, the woman who taught her to sew, who always said each stitch was a prayer. She picked up a needle, her hand shaky, and began. The first stitch was clumsy, but slowly, she found her old rhythm. A small flower bloomed on the fabric, simple but alive. When she finished her first handkerchief, Samuel nodded with approval. "Give it to me," he said. "I'll take it to the market." The handkerchief sold for 2 coins, not much, but enough for a fresh loaf of bread. For the first time in months, Anna felt a spark flare in her chest. She kept sewing, each handkerchief a small step out of the dark. Jacob and Lily started helping, picking thread colors and cheering when she finished a piece. The little house, once cold and silent, began to come alive again. Over time, Anna began to change. She no longer shrank into her fear. With Samuel's encouragement, she made handkerchiefs to sell at the market. It wasn't easy, but each stitch was a prayer, each thread a move toward the light. She taught the children the hymns her mother once sang, and laughter slowly filled the house again. One morning, as Anna sewed by the window, she heard crying from the house across the street. It was Clara's home, a single mother with 3 kids, someone Anna knew only through brief nods. Clara had worked at the factory with her, but now she, too, was struggling. Anna hesitated, then recalled Samuel's words, "You still have yourself." She wrapped a loaf of bread in a sewn handkerchief, then knocked on Clara's door. Clara opened it, her eyes red. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "The kids are hungry, and I've got nothing left." Anna placed the small gift in Clara's hands. "I've been there too," she said. "Someone helped me. Now it's my turn to help you." Clara hugged Anna tightly, tears falling on her shoulder. From that day, the 2 women became friends. They sewed handkerchiefs together, shared food, and slowly built a small community of people needing healing. Anna realized that each time she helped someone, her own pain eased a little. From the day Anna placed the bread and handkerchief in Clara's hands, a small miracle began to sprout in that little town. Clara, with hands once nimble at the factory looms, learned to sew from Anna. They sat together in Anna's kitchen, the faint glow of an oil lamp illuminating fabric scraps, the sound of needles mingling with the laughter of kids playing outside. The handkerchiefs weren't just items, they became symbols of hope. Each embroidered flower a silent prayer, each stitch a thread tying broken hearts together. Samuel often stopped by, bringing new scraps or just a story to brighten their evenings. He sat in the old chair by the fireplace, his eyes gleaming as he watched Anna and Clara work. "You're doing more than sewing," he once said. "You're mending the tears of life." One day, Clara suggested, "Why don't we take these handkerchiefs to the church? People there could buy them, and we could use the money to help others." Anna hesitated. Church had once been her joy, but it was also where she'd walked away when David's death overwhelmed her. She glanced at Samuel, seeking guidance. He just smiled, saying softly, "Jesus went to those who needed him most. Maybe he's waiting for you there." That Sunday, Anna and Clara stood in the churchyard, hands holding neatly stacked handkerchiefs in a basket. Curious folks gathered, and soon coins clinked into their hands. An old woman with silver hair picked up a handkerchief embroidered with a cross, tears streaming down. "I lost my son last year," she whispered. "This feels like it was made for me." Anna took her hand, warmth spreading through her. "It was made for all of us," she said, and for the first time in years, she felt Jesus' presence, not in grand prayers, but in this gentle touch. From then on, the handkerchief group, as the kids called it, began to grow. Other women in town joined: Mary, who lost her husband in the war; Esther, who cared for her aging mother with trembling hands, and Ruth, a young girl who'd run away but now returned. They met weekly, sharing stories, tears, and smiles. Each handkerchief sold didn't just bring food or clothes, it was a reminder they weren't alone. Samuel remained a mystery to Anna. He appeared when she needed him most, with small gifts and words that seemed sent from afar. One evening, as the handkerchief group chattered lively, Anna pulled him aside. "Samuel," she asked quietly, "why do you do all this? Who are you really?" Samuel looked at her, his eyes shining with kindness and a hint of sadness. "I'm just someone who was once lost, Anna. Years ago, I lost everything, my wife, my children, my home, my faith, in a fire. I wandered, angry, thinking life was over. Then a stranger came, gave me a bowl of hot soup, and said, 'Let me help you.' They weren't rich or special, but through them, I saw Jesus." Anna listened, her heart racing. "And now you're doing that for me?" "Not just for you," Samuel replied. "For everyone who needs to hear that message. I don't have much time left, Anna. I'm old, and my son in the south is waiting. But before I go, I want to be sure the fire in you is lit." She gazed at him, feeling as if she stood before someone bearing a greater message. "You talk like you were sent here," she whispered. Samuel chuckled softly. "Maybe I was. Who knows? What matters is you're ready to carry on, not just for yourself, but for others." That night, as Samuel left, Anna knelt by the wooden cross. "Thank you," she prayed, "for sending him. And please give me strength to carry this message further." Things seemed to be going well when a new challenge struck. One morning, Anna's landlord, Mr. Grayson, a harshman who owned much of the town's land, knocked on her door. "You owe me 3 months' rent," he said coldly. "Pay it by the end of the week, or you and the kids are out." Anna panicked. The handkerchief group kept her afloat, but the earnings weren't enough to clear the debt. She turned to Clara, who tried to comfort her. "We'll figure it out," Clara said, her voice shaky. Anna went home, sat before the cross, tears falling. "I thought you were helping me," she whispered. "Why now?" The next morning, Samuel arrived, a light in his eyes. "I heard what happened," he said. "Don't give up. Trust." Anna shook her head. "Trust what?" "I don't have the money." "Trust what you've built," Samuel replied. "Trust this community." With Samuel's push, Anna and Clara rallied the handkerchief group. They shared Anna's story, and a miracle unfolded. Mary brought her meager savings. Esther sold an old ring from her mother. Ruth, with youthful boldness, knocked on every door in town, telling of the handkerchiefs and why they mattered. By day's end, they'd gathered just enough to pay Mr. Grayson, not a penny more, but enough. When Mr. Grayson took the money, he frowned. "I didn't think you'd manage," he said, then left without another word. Anna hugged Clara and the group, tears now of joy. "We did it," she said. "Not me, but all of us." Samuel stood back, smiling. "That's how Jesus works," he said. "He doesn't just help one, he makes a miracle through all." One day, Samuel came with unexpected news. "There's a job at the bakery in town," he said. "I told them about you, and they want to meet you." Anna was stunned. "Why do you do all this for me?" Samuel looked at her, his eyes twinkling. "Because years ago, when I lost everything, someone came and said, 'Let me help you.' That's how Jesus works," through ordinary people like you and me. Now it's your turn to take that message and live it. Anna got the job, and for the first time in years, she felt she wasn't just surviving but truly living. She began helping others in town, a meal for a sick neighbor, a word of encouragement for another single mother. Each small act testified to the healing she'd received. One winter evening, as snow fell lightly outside, Anna sat with her children by the fireplace. She took out the wooden cross and told them her journey, of darkness, of light, and how Jesus sent a stranger to remind her he never left. "Miss Anna," a voice called from the door. Samuel stood there, holding a lantern. "I just came to say goodbye. I'm moving south to live with my son." Anna stood, tears streaming. "Thank you, Samuel. You were the sign I prayed for." Samuel smiled one last time. "No, Anna. You're the sign for yourself and others. Keep carrying that message. Let me help you." It's his word, today and always. As he left, Anna watched until the lantern's light faded. She turned back to her children, her heart full of strength and hope. In the hardest times, she'd found transformation, not through grand miracles, but through the simple, steadfast love of Jesus, sent through a stranger and now living on in her. Days later, Samuel came to say farewell, as before. As he left with his lantern, Anna watched until the light disappeared. But this time, she didn't feel alone. She returned to the handkerchief group, her children, and the faith rekindled within her. She began writing small notes, like the one Samuel left in that first basket, and tucked them into each handkerchief. "Fear not, for I am with you. Let me help you." Those words spread through the town, through the hands of those who received the handkerchiefs, and beyond. Anna knew her journey wasn't over. More storms would come, more hard days. But now, she carried Jesus' strength, not to escape hardship, but to walk through it. With hope and love as her guiding light, after Samuel left, Anna felt a small flame ignite within her, not a roaring blaze, but a steady glow to pierce the dark. The handkerchief group was no longer just a way to survive, it became a mission. Anna started holding meetings more often, not just to sew but to share stories, prayers, and dreams of a better future. One evening, as the fireplace crackled, Anna stood before the group, now over 10 women, from single mothers like her to frail widows. She held the wooden cross, her voice trembling but resolute. "I used to think God had forsaken me," she said. "But He never left. He brought us together to lift each other up. I want us to do more than make handkerchiefs. I want us to be a light for others in this town." Clara, sitting beside her with clasped hands, nodded. "I agree. We can do more, bring food to the hungry, fix homes for those without shelter, anything we can." The idea spread like a spring breeze. The group expanded. They used handkerchief profits to buy food, repair crumbling houses, and even set up a corner in the church to teach children Bible stories and hymns. Anna became the heart of it all, not because she sought it, but because others saw in her a strength she hadn't recognized. Jacob and Lily, now a bit older, joined in. Jacob, with hands skilled like his father's, fixed old wooden toys for the town's children. Lily, with her clear voice, led hymns at meetings. Anna watched them, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. David would be so happy, she whispered to herself, feeling as if he were still somewhere, smiling down. Clara, Anna's closest friend in the group, was undergoing her own transformation. Before meeting Anna, Clara lived in a world of shame and fear. Her husband, an alcoholic, left when her youngest was still in the crib. She worked at the factory to feed her 3 children, Thomas, Sarah, and little Ellie, but when it closed, she sank into despair. She'd thought herself unworthy of love or help, her life a series of atonements for unfixable mistakes. But Anna changed that. The day Anna brought bread and a handkerchief, Clara felt a light pierce her darkness. Now, in the handkerchief group, she found purpose. She became the organizer, planning food deliveries and tracking their earnings. Most importantly, she began to believe Jesus still cared for her. One afternoon, as Clara sewed a handkerchief with a lily, her mother's favorite flower, Ellie ran up, hugging her legs. "Mommy, I see you smile more now," the girl said, her eyes bright. Clara stopped, tears falling. "Because I've found hope, sweetie," she replied, pulling Ellie close. That night, she knelt for the first time in years, praying, "Thank you for Anna, for this group, and for not giving up on me." Standing, she felt lighter, as if the burdens of her past had lifted. Ruth, the youngest in the group, was a different story. At 18, she'd run away after a fight with her strict parents. She wandered through towns, surviving on strangers' kindness, but carried loneliness and guilt. When she returned to town, hungry and ragged, Anna was the first to reach out. "No one judges you here," Anna said, handing Ruth a handkerchief and a bowl of hot soup. Since then, Ruth joined the group but stayed quiet, her eyes wary. She sewed quickly and beautifully but kept her distance. One day, as the group packed handkerchiefs for the market, Ruth spoke up. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Why are you all so good to me? I don't deserve it." Anna rested a hand on her shoulder. "None of us deserve it, Ruth. But Jesus doesn't care about that. He cares if we're willing to stand and move forward." Those words struck Ruth. That night, she wrote a letter to her parents, apologizing and asking to visit. Sending it, her heart felt lighter. Weeks later, her father appeared at Anna's door, embracing Ruth with tears. "We thought we'd lost you forever," he said. Ruth turned to Anna, smiling through tears. "Thank you. You helped me find my way home, not just to my family, but to myself." Everything seemed on track when the biggest challenge yet hit. A summer flood swept through town after days of heavy rain. Water rose, destroying homes, washing away crops, and leaving dozens of families with nothing. Anna's house flooded knee-deep, the kitchen, the group's heart, now a muddy ruin. Anna stood amid the wreckage, holding Jacob and Lily, her spirit heavy. "Why?" she whispered, staring at the mud-stained cross on the floor. "We were trying to do right. Why now?" Clara, Ruth, and the others came as the water receded. They said little, just cleaned quietly, bringing what they had: blankets, food, hope. But Anna's faith wavered. She sat alone in a corner, hands over her face. When Clara approached, "Anna, you can't give up," Clara said. "You taught me God doesn't abandon us, even in storms." Anna looked up, tears streaming. "But look at what we've lost, Clara. How do we go on?" Clara took her hand. "Like you did with me, one step at a time. We don't have to fix everything now. We just have to start." Those words woke Anna. She stood, wiped her tears, and with the group, began rebuilding. They didn't just fix their own homes but helped neighbors, raising walls, clearing mud, handing out surviving handkerchiefs with the note, "Let me help you." Word of their kindness spread. One day, a group from a nearby town arrived with wood, food, and tools. "We heard about you," their leader said. "We want to help." Anna watched the scene, strangers working with her group, and knelt in the mud, praying, "Thank you, Jesus, for showing me you're in all this." She realized the storm wasn't an end but a new beginning, proof that even in the darkest times, light could shine. After the flood, the handkerchief group's fame stretched beyond the little town. People from nearby regions came, not just for help, but to learn. One morning, a woman named Miriam from a village 30 miles away appeared at Anna's door. She was thin, her eyes sunken from hunger, but her voice firm. "I heard about what you do," Miriam said, clutching a handkerchief someone had given her. "My village was hit by the flood too. We don't know where to start. Can you teach me?" Anna looked at Miriam, seeing herself from months ago, desperate, yet yearning for hope. She smiled. "Not just me. We'll all do it together." Miriam stayed a week, learning to sew from Anna and Clara, organization from Ruth, and patience from older women like Esther. When she left, she carried a basket of fabric scraps and a promise, "I'll start a group like this in my village. And I'll tell them this light came from you." Soon, letters arrived from distant villages, towns Anna had never heard of. One read, "We made 5 handkerchiefs and bought food for a family who lost their home." Another, "Our group sings hymns every night, like you do." Anna read each letter to the group, tears of joy falling. She saw their mission wasn't just surviving the storm, it was lighting small fires everywhere. Jacob, now 10, suggested, "Mom, why don't we take a trip? Visit these places, help them in person." Anna hugged him, proud he'd inherited his father's open heart. She agreed, and the group began journeys, carrying not just handkerchiefs, but love, encouragement, and prayers. Once, in a flood-ravaged village, Anna stood before a weary but hopeful crowd. She held the wooden cross, her voice ringing in the damp air. "We're not here to save you," she said. "We're here to say Jesus is already here, in each of you. Let us help you, and then you'll help others." The crowd fell silent, then an elderly man with a cane stepped forward. "I stopped praying long ago," he said. "But today, I'll start again." That night, the village rang with hymns, laughter, and sewing, a symphony of healing. Anna's mission grew, but darkness never fully retreated. One cold winter day, as the group planned their next trip, bad news struck. Mr. Grayson, the landlord who'd once threatened her, returned with a bigger plan. He'd bought most of the town's land, including the church plot where the group met. He announced he'd tear it down for a lumber mill, and families like Anna's had to leave unless they paid steeply raised rent. Anna stood before the group, clutching the cross, her heart heavy. "We survived the flood," she said, voice choking. "But this time, I don't know what to do." Clara held her hand. "We'll find a way, like always." But even Clara's eyes betrayed worry. News spread fast, and the community panicked. Some left, seeking new homes. Those who stayed looked to Anna, expecting a miracle. But this time, she felt unequal to it. She hid in the now clean kitchen, kneeling before the cross. "I've tried," she wept. "I've done all you asked. Why let this happen?" She sat there for hours, no answer coming, just the wind howling through the window. Then a memory flashed, Samuel, with his lantern and gentle smile, saying, "He doesn't just help one, he makes a miracle through all." Anna looked up, wiping tears. "All," she whispered. "Not just me." Anna rallied the group, this time not just the handkerchief makers but the whole town and nearby villages they'd helped. Over 100 gathered in the churchyard under a gray, snowy sky. Anna stood, her voice stronger than ever, Mr. Grayson wants to take this church, our homes," she said. "But we don't fight alone. We're a family, not just here, but everywhere we've been. I ask you, stand with me." Ruth, with youthful daring, ran to nearby villages, carrying Anna's call. Clara wrote to distant handkerchief groups. Jacob and Lily made signs, "Let us help you, now help us." Within days, an unimaginable thing happened. Hundreds from far and wide came to town, bringing money, tools, and courage. They faced Mr. Grayson in a meeting at the church. Anna stood amid the crowd, cross in hand. "We don't have enough money to buy this land," she said. "But we have each other. If you tear down this church, you'll break the hearts of hundreds here today." Mr. Grayson faltered for the first time. The crowd was silent, but their strength spoke. Finally, he backed down. "I'll keep the church," he growled. "But don't expect lower rent." As he left, the crowd cheered. Anna hugged Clara, Ruth, and her children, tears mingling with smiles. They hadn't won with money, but with love, the love Jesus placed in them, spread through every handkerchief, every prayer. The next spring, Anna stood on a hill overlooking the town. The church still stood, now with freshly painted walls. The handkerchief group had grown stronger than ever, not just in town but across the region. Each week, she got letters from far-off places about new groups forming. Lives changed. Jacob and Lily began their own paths, Jacob crafting wood, Lily teaching children to sing. Clara found joy leading the group, while Ruth returned to her family but visited often. Anna knew their mission would never end, but it had surpassed her wildest dreams. She set the wooden cross on the ground, knelt beside it, and prayed, "Thank you, Jesus, for being with me through every storm. Your message today lives on, in me, in them, in all who hear it." Rising, the wind brushed her hair, carrying spring scent. Anna smiled, knowing this light would never fade. Years passed since Anna stood on that hill, gazing at the town with the wooden cross in hand. Her hair was now streaked with silver, but her eyes still shone with hope. The handkerchief group was no longer small, it was a movement, with dozens of communities across the region carrying the message, "Let me help you." Anna didn't travel much anymore, but she spent her days in the refurbished kitchen, writing to distant groups and telling stories to the town's children. Jacob, now 20, was tall with hands as skilled as his father's. He opened a small workshop, making toys, furniture, and wooden crosses like his grandmother's gift. But what made Anna proudest was how he used it to help others, teaching trade to youths orphaned by floods or lost like Ruth once was. "You taught me every piece I make is a prayer," Jacob once told her, and Anna knew David's spirit lived in her son. Lily, at 18, became the town's voice. She led the church choir, taught kids hymns, and wrote songs about her mother's journey in the handkerchief group. One light in the storm spread across the region, comforting those in hardship. With her father's blue eyes and her mother's open heart, Lily sang, and Anna felt Jesus speaking through her daughter. But it wasn't just Jacob and Lily carrying on. Thomas, Clara's eldest, now a strong young man, loved fixing things. He led a small team to disaster-struck villages, rebuilding homes, and praying with families who'd lost everything. Sarah, Clara's second child, became a storyteller, recording the group's tales in a thick notebook she hoped would one day be a book. Little Ellie, now a teenager, often sat with Anna, learning to sew and soaking in lessons of faith. Ruth, reconciled with her family, married a kind blacksmith named Daniel. They moved to a nearby town, where Ruth started her own handkerchief group. She sent Anna letters, often with handkerchiefs embroidered with doves, symbols of the peace she'd found, Anna watched this new generation, her heart full of gratitude. She knew the mission wasn't hers alone anymore. It had been passed on, like a flame shared from a lantern in the dark, but life never lacked challenges, even as the light spread. A harsh winter hit, colder than any Anna had known. Snow fell thick, freezing roads and cutting ties with other villages. The town faced scarcity, food dwindled, firewood ran low, and letters from distant groups stopped. Anna, weakened by age, felt this winter's weight on her shoulders. One morning, she woke with a high fever, her body trembling under blankets. Jacob and Lily stayed by her, worried, but Anna smiled faintly. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, echoing Samuel's verse. "I am with you." Clara, now elderly too, visited daily with hot soup and prayers. "You can't give up," Clara said, holding Anna's hand. "We need you." But Anna felt a strange peace. She looked around the kitchen, once a ruin after the flood, where the group began, where she rediscovered faith. She knew her mission didn't hinge on her lifespan, but on what she'd planted. One night, as snow stopped and the sky cleared, Anna called Jacob and Lily to her bedside. She gave them the wooden cross, worn by time. "Keep it," she said. "And keep telling people, let me help you. It's Jesus' message, not just for me, but for us all." Jacob held her hand, tears falling. "I promise, Mom." Lily rested her head on Anna's shoulder, softly singing light in the storm, her voice trembling but loving. The next morning, Anna passed in her sleep, a smile on her lips. The town gathered to bid her farewell, not in sorrow, but in honor. They placed the wooden cross on her grave, with a stone reading, "Anna, the one who lit hope." Spring returned, bringing warmth and life. Jacob stood in his workshop, finishing a new cross, a gift for a village that survived the harsh winter. Lily led the choir in song at her mother's grave, her music echoing over the hills. Clara, though old, still sewed handkerchiefs, each stitch a prayer for Anna and those she'd helped. Thomas, Sarah, and Ellie carried on their mother's work, bringing food and hope where needed most. Ruth, in her town, told her children of the woman who changed her life. Her handkerchief group growing stronger. Years later, Sarah's book was finished, a collection of stories about Anna, the handkerchief group, and the message that spread across the region. Titled "Let Me Help You," each page testified to love, faith, and transformation. It reached thousands, from tiny villages to big cities, sparking new flames where darkness once reigned. One day, a little girl in town, Lily's niece, picked up the old wooden cross from Anna's moss-covered grave. She ran to Jacob, asking, "Uncle, what's this?" Jacob smiled, lifting her up. "It's your grandmother's story," he said. "She taught us that even in the darkest days, Jesus is there, saying, 'Let me help you.' And then we say it to others." The girl nodded, hugging the cross. "I want to help too," she said. Jacob laughed, setting her down. "Then let's start." On the hill, a breeze carried Lily's singing and children's laughter. Under a vast blue sky, Anna's message, Jesus' message, lived on, not just in that small town, but in every heart ready to listen and reach out.